Lift the hood of a 1952 Chevrolet in Havana, and the original Chevrolet engine may be gone. In its place, you may find a diesel from Nissan, Hyundai, or a Soviet-era vehicle connected to the American gearbox with an adapter made in a local workshop. The badge carries an American name. The components under it come from several countries and several decades. U.S. trade restrictions ended the normal supply of American cars and spare parts. Owners then maintained the cars already on the island for another 6 decades. Tropical heat, humidity, salt air, and daily use made that work unusually difficult. A parked car in those conditions quickly develops rust, leaks, and seized components. How did owners keep thousands of individual systems working without normal factory support? Cuban families kept many of these cars in service as transport, taxis, and sources of household income. That required repeated rebuilding with whatever parts mechanics could obtain. The familiar image of Havana is almost too perfect. Pastel buildings, sea spray over the malecon, and a pink Cadillac moving through the frame as if someone forgot to end the 1950s. Tourism advertising often presents Cuba as a time capsule and its cars as a rolling museum. The image leaves out decades of daily work and repair. Owners used these vehicles continuously, often as essential family property. Many of these cars spent decades carrying families, luggage, building materials, and paying passengers. They stood outside in salt air and traveled on damaged roads. Their owners dealt with fuel shortages and long periods when the correct replacement part simply did not exist. A common account begins and ends in 1959. After the revolution, relations with the United States deteriorated and imports fell. That account explains the age of the original fleet. It covers only the starting conditions. Before the revolution, American brands were common in Cuban cities. Chevrolet, Ford, Plymouth, Buick, Dodge, and Cadillac dealers received vehicles through commercial links with the United States. Policy changes later restricted that trade. In February 1962, President John F. Kennedy's Proclamation 3447 imposed an embargo on trade between the United States and Cuba, expanding restrictions that had already begun under Eisenhower. American cars, factory parts, and normal dealer support were no longer available through the old channels. Those restrictions explain the lack of new American vehicles and factory parts. The continued operation of the existing cars came from work carried out inside Cuba. How many original components need to remain before you would call it a different car? Write your answer in the comments. We will return to that question after seeing what owners changed. Imagine trying to keep a family car for 60 years without ordering the correct water pump, brake cylinder, piston ring, or windscreen seal. Then add heat, humidity, coastal air, poor fuel, and daily commercial use. Under those conditions, most cars eventually reach a point where owners dismantle or scrap them. Some cars disappeared. Mechanics dismantled others and used the serviceable parts to complete one running vehicle. They patched body panels, moved trim between cars, and adapted components from unrelated models. Cuba also imported vehicles from the Soviet Union and other socialist countries. Ladas, Moskviches, Volgas, and Eastern European buses entered service. Later imports included Fiats, Peugeots, Korean cars, and Chinese models. American cars therefore shared roads and workshops with Soviet, Asian, and European vehicles. Mechanics began combining available components from these groups. Old American engines used large amounts of fuel, and correct rebuild parts became difficult to obtain. Owners who needed reliable daily transport often chose an available replacement engine. Many selected smaller diesels because they used less fuel and had better local parts support. Engine swapping happens everywhere. Cuban mechanics used it repeatedly because original powertrains and parts were scarce. When a gasoline straight six could no longer be repaired, a mechanic might install a smaller diesel with lower fuel consumption and more available parts. Brand, country, and year mattered less than dimensions, output, and the mechanic's ability to connect it to the existing drivetrain. This work required considerable engineering skill. Engine mounts have to line up with a chassis never designed for them. The gearbox may require an adapter plate. Cooling, wiring, exhaust, throttle linkages, and instruments all need solutions. A factory solves these problems with drawings, suppliers, test rigs, and thousands of identical parts. A Cuban workshop might solve them once for one car, with the metal and tools available that week. A converted Chevrolet might retain its original body and registration while using a Japanese engine, Russian electrical components, and brake parts made locally or adapted from a newer model. Owners usually worked with a narrow set of options. A functioning car could carry relatives or paying passengers. A disabled car consumed space and money until parts became available. A 2016 Michigan Public Report described a taxi driver, Carlos Zamora, using a 1952 Chevrolet Bel Air that had passed from his grandfather to his father and then to him. The original engine was gone. In its place was a Nissan engine from 1995. 3 generations of one family used the car. The Nissan engine allowed Carlos Zamora to continue operating it. If you enjoy car history that includes workshop decisions and the economics around them, subscribe to the channel. Workshop choices and running costs are central to this story. In countries with accessible credit and a steady supply of used cars, owners often replace an old sedan once repair becomes too expensive. Cuban families faced a much smaller and more expensive pool of replacements. For decades, the government tightly controlled private vehicle ownership and transfers. A car already registered within a family could provide more practical value than its sale price because few newer cars were available for purchase. Repeated rebuilds could therefore make financial sense. Each repair extended access to transport and preserved the family's ability to earn money with the vehicle. The same Michigan Public Report tells the story of Sergio Torres and a 1954 Pontiac. He bought it for $250 when it did not run, the interior was falling apart, and it did not even have a steering wheel. Friends and family helped finance a rebuild that reportedly cost nearly $3,000. The car received a Hyundai engine. A collector would usually deduct value for the Hyundai engine. Torres and his family gained a usable vehicle after the rebuild. Cuban owners often placed reliable operation above matching numbers because transport and taxi work had direct financial value. Cuba's old American sedans are often called almendrones, a nickname usually linked to their rounded, almond-like shape. Many work as shared taxis. Polished convertibles wait outside hotels, while many local almendrones are worn 4-door sedans on regular shared routes. A driver collects several passengers traveling in the same direction, follows a familiar corridor, and repeats the trip. The fares help pay for fuel, maintenance, and later repairs. Every working day can generate money for the household and the next repair. An engine replacement can be recovered through future fares. One taxi driver interviewed by Michigan Public said he could make more from driving than from government employment. Newer cars remain difficult or expensive to acquire, and public transport does not cover every journey. Shared taxis serve some of that demand. Their revenue gives owners a reason to pay for another repair. Operating costs remain high. Fuel, tires, batteries, belts, and imported components can consume a driver's income. A breakdown stops that income immediately. Passenger demand on established routes still gives many owners a financial reason to return the car to service. The Soviet Union's collapse changed the economics of operating these cars. For years, trade with the socialist bloc supplied Cuba with vehicles, fuel, and industrial support. The loss of that trade contributed to the economic crisis known as the Special Period. Imports fell, fuel became scarce, and vehicle maintenance became harder. The Cuban government also sought hard currency through tourism. Tourist spending created another source of income for owners of recognizable 1950s cars. Some cars continued as shared transport for Cuban passengers. Owners prepared others for tourist rides past the capital, the Malecón, and the restored squares of old Havana, often with glossy paint and open roofs. Tourists paid for the recognizable body shape, chrome, and tail fins. Owners could use that income to maintain the replacement engines and locally adapted systems under the body. A highly polished exterior could therefore sit above decades of mechanical alterations. Cuba gradually loosened some of its vehicle rules. In 2011, broader private buying and selling of cars became legal. A further reform removed the need for special government permission to buy newer vehicles from state sellers. The reforms allowed more people to consider a modern replacement. State dealer prices kept that option beyond the reach of most households. Reuters reported that when the new rules took effect in 2014, a Havana dealership listed a Peugeot 206 at $91,000 and a Peugeot 508 at $262,000. These prices existed in a country where ordinary state salaries were nowhere close to the cost of the cars. During the first 6 months, Cuba sold only 50 cars and 4 motorcycles through the new system, according to government figures reported by Reuters. The law permitted more purchases, while the official prices limited how many families could complete one. Keeping an existing car operational remained the more realistic option for most households. Several conditions kept the old fleet in service: trade restrictions, domestic regulation, low incomes, expensive imports, gaps in public transport, family ownership, mechanical knowledge, and taxi revenue. Changing one rule left the other costs and constraints in place. Collectors usually check whether the paint matches a period catalog, the engine number matches the chassis, and the upholstery follows the factory pattern. Those measures determine auction value. An Almendron also has a history of family ownership, passenger service, and repeated local repairs. The same body can remain within a family while engines, wiring, brakes, and interior parts change. Registration, ownership, and daily use provide continuity across those rebuilds. Very little original material may remain after several decades. Long-term operation remains uncertain. Corrosion removes usable metal. Skilled mechanics retire. Fuel shortages can keep a repaired taxi off the road. Newer imports, changing regulations, and the cost of another rebuild may eventually make replacement cheaper. These cars remain in service because owners replaced parts repeatedly. The recognizable body often outlasted most of the mechanical components attached to it. U.S. policy restricted the supply of American vehicles and parts. Cuban mechanics fabricated missing components and installed available engines. Families pooled money for rebuilds, and passengers supplied revenue through daily fares. Havana's working fleet now combines American bodies, socialist-era parts, Japanese and Korean engines, Cuban workmanship, and decades of use. These are Cuban working vehicles built around remaining American structures. Decades of local repair are part of each vehicle's identity.